South Africans can expect to have rolling power outages for the next 2 years at least. This was one of the announcements made by Eskom board chairperson Mpho Makwana when the power utility gave an update on the current system challenges. The utility says they plan to maintain systems during this period. For some reaction on this, we're now joined by Tshepo Kgadima, an energy expert. Tshepo, appreciate your time. Great to speak to you. We had a conversation, I think, just before Christmas.
Must have been on Christmas Day. And yes, thankfully the lights were on that day.
Yes, there were. Lights were on Christmas Day. But what we have been promised, courtesy of the chair of Eskom, is that for the next 2 years, there's going to be fixed rolling blackouts. Now, as a suggestion, is this a good thing? That should we be grateful that we've got some consistency over the next 2 years? That if they can moderate it at between a stage 2 and a stage 3, businesses can plan, or do Eskom need to up their game?
Eskom certainly needed to have upped their game, but I think from today's briefing it is evident that Eskom is a lost cause. On the 1st of March this year, Eskom will be celebrating the centenary. And I dare say that that centenary, 100 years of Eskom's existence, will actually mark the burial of Eskom. And I think that was confirmed pretty much today by the briefing that we saw. There are two things that I think maybe we should reflect on. Is that we now have an animal called NECOM, National Electricity Crisis Committee. That is nothing but the reincarnation of the war room. When the war room was introduced in December 2014, then started operating in January 2015. I'm one of the people who went on record to protest the illegality, the unlawfulness of that animal called the war room, because it usurped power from Eskom executives and from the board of Eskom, and it was counterproductive. And of course, it died a natural death by August 2015. It has now been reincarnated into this so-called National Electricity Crisis Committee from, I think, July 25, 2022, the previous year. And when you look at in terms of how it is constituted and how it is once again constituted, unfortunately, by people who I can tell you without fear of shadow of doubt anything. Not a single person in that NECOM knows the difference between current and voltage, between a megawatt and a megawatt hour, or even between energy and electricity. They don't know. And that is based on their own pronouncements.
How did
Well, the president hasn't told us how he came about to constituting that, but from their work, when you take into account from inception in 2022, July, to date, and the pronouncement that they came up with on Friday, it is very evident. And secondly, the board itself, which is now celebrating 120 days, this also comes on the back of, on the 21st of January 2018, I wrote, because then the late Jabu Mabuza had just been appointed chair of the Eskom board. I then wrote an open ad, and I said, these are some of the things that I would do had I been appointed chair of the board of Eskom. And in fact, it didn't matter whether it was me or anybody else. The issue is this. Anybody
had you put your name in the hat for the board of for the chair of the board of Eskom?
No, the recruitment process first and foremost was never made public, and that is one I think of the concerns that arose today when in terms of the next chief executive of Eskom, how they're going to be recruited and appointed. And I'm on record, and I continue to repeat that the next CEO of Eskom must be appointed through a public interview process, because Eskom is of national interest. Everyone in this country, Eskom is a public enterprise.
Is that an office you'd like to hold, Tshepo?
Of what? Eskom...
Chief Executive?
No, I think that train is long railed. 5 years ago, certainly, I could have done a great job. And today, I think that Eskom is in a moribund state. Eskom will not be able to survive based on the decisions that have been taken. For example, you've got a board that has been in office for 120 days. In that period, they did, which I warned against in 2018. Don't usurp power from the executives. They have met over 50 times. They've got one of the committees that met over 20 times.
That's in terms of
corporate governance, that is an anomaly.
I'm glad you raised that, because it was one of the talking points I wanted us to discuss. The Mpho Makwana, the Eskom board chair, talked about the 50 times that they've met. He talked about the one committee that's met 20 times, 70 meetings in a little over 100 days. I mean, I'm not sure what it suggests, but it certainly doesn't suggest that we know what we are doing if we have to meet so frequently.
No, they don't know what they are doing. They admit themselves that they don't know what they are doing. And how do they admit that? One of the admissions come by way of agreeing to what the so-called NECOM has demanded, that an independent consultancy that is an expert in project management be appointed to say, how do we do a generation recovery? Now, that so-called generation recovery plan that they've given this private company, to start with, if the people within Eskom don't have the capacity to even comprehend the problems that they are facing and come up with solutions, because they are highly paid, by the way. Eskom people are well highly paid. This board is highly paid. I'll be interested to see how much they've earned in fees in those number of meetings that they have had. And the CEO, the COO, the CFO, all of them are highly paid. We expect of them nothing other than to do that which Eskom was established for. But that, I think, they have now admitted. The question is where to from here. They're saying over the next 2 years there's going to be load shedding. The NECOM has said that they now, since they dropped the requirement that up to 100 megawatts you don't require a NERSA license, that there's therefore a pipeline of 9,000 megawatts of power that is about to come on stream. Now, if that private sector is so efficient and can deliver so quickly, how come we are going to have 2 more years of rolling blackouts? But also they have not told us, that is Eskom board and management, that what is the financial impact in terms of revenue loss? The 2 years, how many days of load shedding, what stages of load shedding, what does that translate into in terms of the megawatt hours or gigawatt hours that will be lost, that will not be sold, and that revenue sales loss, what does it in turn mean for the financial standing of Eskom, which is very precarious, as we all know, and that even the NERSA increase of 18.65% followed by 12.75%, so within the 2 years that they are reflecting upon, what does that mean? Because in the few years we have seen, 2015 to date, Eskom lost 5,000 megawatts of demand that they ordinarily would have met. This year, based on the tariff increases and based on the assurance from the Eskom board that for the next 2 years we can have no expectation of reliable supply of electricity, that even whatever electricity we are going to get, it's at such a high cost, it means the following, that this year alone, we are going to see an acceleration of migration of demand, which ordinarily would have met by Eskom going off-grid. And I say to you, as Eskom celebrates the centenary, which is its burial, is predicated on the following. The future of electricity in South Africa is off-grid. That you can be assured about, because all our energy-intensive industries have been decimated. There are no new mines we are going to open, because in the last 10 years we have had no exploration expenditure. So geologically we have got lesser understanding of where this country is. So the minerals in terms of processing and otherwise, you're not going to see that. But when you talk about the 4IR economies, whether data centers or cryptocurrency mining, all of that is an unknown, but it's energy intensive. But there is not a single major player that has made that commitment that they are going to invest in those industries which are energy intensive, therefore capitalism. And with Eskom's customer base from households, residential customers, constitute 44.9% of Eskom's income in terms of electricity sales. And we are going to see the highest degree of migration off-grid, because the equilibrium has been breached, which simply means that it now costs more to buy electricity from Eskom than it is to generate, self-generate off-grid. Well, and that poses a very big, the consequences are catastrophic, to say the least.
Okay, so let's look at it this way. The cost of going off-grid, if you're a resident, are unaffordable. And this is evidenced by the fact that municipalities who are collecting on behalf of Eskom are owed 300 billion, I think it is.
No, they told us that they are, I think, over 50 billion rand from municipal debt. But take this into account, 35.4 billion of that will have to be impaired, meaning written off, in the financial year end March 2023, and that's just the rules of accounting in terms of the IFRS, or International Financial Reporting Standards.
They
have to write off that 35.4 billion. So that also is a distortion of the financial health of Eskom. The balance sheet of Eskom is not as strong as they are saying, but the decisions that they now have pronounced and announced today, going forward, that this is how they're going to run this entity, it tells you one thing and one thing only, that is going to be a premature death. Therefore, the board's view that they have got the luxury, they've got a latitude of time to be able to attend these very pressing issues, for me, is naive, but dangerously so.
Well, you've said 44% of Eskom's revenue is coming from household. I think that's what you said.
Yeah, residential customers.
Yeah. Now, a huge amount of these cannot afford to go off-grid.
They don't have to. When Mr. Makwana was appointed chair of the board of Eskom, I made the following, and I was very sincere, and I was not personal with him. I don't care what Mr. Makwana would be paid as the chair of Eskom. Whether he's paid 12 million or 15 million rent a year, as long as he can get the job done. But he cannot do so because he's also chair of another JSE-listed, one of the big 4 banks in the country, Nedbank. He can't have both. And here is what is flabbergasting, to say the least.
Why can he not?
On the other hand, Mr. Sello Moloko, who is the chair of ABSA Group, had to step down from the board of Telkom because the Prudential Authority said, hold on a second, the ABSA job is so important because of the importance of banking in our economy that you can't have both. You must decide where you want to be, but we determine that you must stay with... I am surprised that the Prudential Authority, the registrar of banks, has not made a similar demand on Mr. Makwana. And it is therefore not surprising. But I also mentioned that there's a conflict of interest because on one hand you've got Nedbank, which is one of the big funders of the renewable independent power producers who deliver zero electricity that is usable by a customer. But they have invested so much money based on government guarantees on the one hand. So there is a conflict of interest because the independent power producers, they are the chief root of Eskom's financial problems. So where does Mr. Makwana's fiduciary duty lies in that instance? He should have chosen one of the two. But here is what Mr. Brown said, who is the CEO of Nedbank, at the World Economic Forum just a few days ago. He said that actually load shedding is a great thing for this economy because it means that there will be new investment that kills the monopoly that is Eskom. So how is the chair of Nedbank have the CEO say such at such a forum to say we need to kill the monopoly? What does that say about the chair of Eskom, who's also the chair there? Where are his priorities? Is he there to preside over the death of Eskom? And when you look in terms of the pronouncements they are making, you can't help but reach that unfortunate conclusion.
Whether he says that or not, you've already said that Eskom is on its way out, that it's celebrating its death.
Yeah, but I'm backing up what Mr. Brown has said. What he said at the World Economic Forum.
Finally, Tshepo, before we go, because we are out of time, we've just heard from the Eskom COO, Jan Oberholzer, that Eskom has purchased 50 million litres worth of diesel in order to navigate the issues around load shedding. Is this a positive development? Should it give us a sense of safety, for want of a better description, if you will?
Not at all. It is insanity, and it's got disastrous consequences for Eskom, and they know that. Why they continue to believe that you can generate baseload power at over 8 rand, because where the oil price is now, just the last financial year that ended 2022 March, they were generating at 4.50 rand a kilowatt hour. Today, how much will you sell that kilowatt hour for? And they don't seem to have an appreciation of this, how the precarious situation that they have put Eskom in by continuing to believe that you can generate electricity. How are they going to... They also admitted to, by the way, to reckless trading by the announcement they made today, because they are making long-term commitments when they don't have a direct line of sight that in the next 6 months they can meet their debts as they become due and payable. And therefore the commitments that they are making, what does that say? Somebody somewhere is going to have to carry the bag. Who is that person that's going to carry the bag? But the board must get out of the kitchen. They must stop meeting so many times. They are not full-time employees. They must appoint competent management. The CEO of Eskom must be appointed through a public interview process where all South Africans can be satisfied that such a person has got a demonstrable practicable plan to bring to an end once and for all load shedding within a period of 90 days, they can do so based on the plant that they have. People like myself, we have got the expertise to be able to help in those instances.
We've run short of time, but certainly a lot to talk about, and appreciate those insights. Energy expert Tshepo Kgadima.